What happens when law, business, and life collide? Each week on Lead Counsel, your host Tom Tona will take a deep dive into topics related to the law, the business of law, and life. There will be insightful discussions with industry insiders, experts, and thought leaders making significant contributions and meaningful differences in their fields of expertise. Tom is the founder and managing attorney at TonaLaw. He has been a practicing attorney since 1994 and the leader of TonaLaw since it opened in 2001. The goal of this podcast is to provide you with free information on law and the business of law, and to give you actionable tools related to each of these areas. Now, here's Tom.
Hey, welcome back to the Lead Counsel Podcast. Your host, Tom Tona. Before we jump into today's topic, I just want to take a minute to thank the sponsors of the podcast. This episode is sponsored by TonaLaw. They're not just another law firm. They're defining what it means to fight for their clients. We get a lot of attorney referrals from across the country. We pay fee participation in all jurisdictions where it's permitted. We focus on integrity, innovation, and relentless advocacy. TonaLaw is proving that the business of law can scale without losing its heart. If you want to see how a modern firm is built for impact and happy client referrals, check out TonaLaw.com. Mention again the Lead Counsel Podcast, and I'm happy to get on the phone with you. I am joined today by Monty Cain. Monty is a personal injury law firm owner in Oklahoma. The name of the firm is Cain Law Injury Lawyers. Monty, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Thomas. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on. We were introduced through Riley Harrison, and I met Riley because he's got this unique handle, Barred and Bearded, right? Barred and Bearded online. I started following him. I don't think he probably even knew who I was at the time, but he's got a pretty interesting LinkedIn and Twitter and different social media. And he caught my attention because he's so active online. And he reached out one day and he said, hey, I found your podcast. I became a listener. Do you have any interest in speaking to the owner of my firm? He's doing some really cool stuff. And I thought, yeah, I looked you up and you've got a bigger firm. Like you're at 11 lawyers and I think 50 people in total. And so I thought it'd be cool to kind of get you on, hear your story, because that's not an easy feat to build to that size, especially in this market. Right.
Yeah, it's definitely been a challenge, but rewarding, and it's taken some, a lot of time, but we got there and we kind of got it rolling now.
So take us to how you got it rolling to right now, because this really messy journey I find, especially with personal injury, because of how expensive it is, right? Case disbursements, carrying costs, interest, overhead, all of that stuff. It's not easy to get to the position you're at right now. How did you get there? What do you attribute the biggest, needle movers to?
Yeah, so just to give you a little bit of background, I didn't become a lawyer until I was 36, so I had a prior career, and then I actually worked for another firm as just an independent contractor for them for 16 years. So I guess been 15 years now, so I was 52 when I went out on my own and started my own practice. So in the last 15 years, then we went from just me and one assistant to, now we've got probably 35 to 40 assistants and maybe 12 attorneys now. So anyway, it's grown to that over a period of time. And, as far as how we got there, obviously, I had quite a bit of experience of litigating cases when I went out on my own, but it's just mainly the way I didn't ever envision growing to what I've grown to today. Didn't really have a plan, didn't really intentionally look at that. Just tried to, my core value was to try to do the best job I could for my client and put their interest above mine and try to give them a great result or maximum result on their case on every single client that I had. Over about 5 or 6 years, it started to kind of snowball, and I had brought in an attorney at that time, and we brought in a couple assistants, and then it just kept snowballing from there. And then at some point, I started doing some national conferences and like ATAA, actually a PITLA, which was the precursor to ATAA. So learned about trucking, also started going to the brain injury conferences. And obviously, I think learned from the best in the business and great experts and expanded my knowledge, and really things started taking off from there for us. Also was involved in a case that involved also a semi and a brain injury, and that we changed the law regarding the trucking direct action against them in Oklahoma. It was a mixed bag. If you went to federal court, you couldn't make a claim against the trucking company directly. It was only through respondeat superior through the driver. And then in state court, it was a mixed bag. Sometimes you won it, sometimes you didn't. We took that up to the Supreme Court and won 9-0, and now we can do direct actions against the commercial motor vehicle carrier. So before you could do that, when you couldn't do that, you couldn't bring in if they were a bad carrier and had bad safety record, things of that nature. Now you can. So it's really been a game changer for not only us, but also anybody that's been involved with a commercial motor vehicle crash and been injured, and other attorneys in our state as well. So certainly that was a big needle mover for us, as well as the other big needle mover, I think, is learning brain injury. I partnered with another attorney from Virginia who happened to be an AAJ, and they're president of the brain injury litigation division, and learned about brain injury and kind of started that, I think, earlier than most people in Oklahoma. I mean, now it's kind of, it was in California and Florida and some other places, but it hadn't really reached Oklahoma. And so we kind of got into that space and learned how to do it and really developed that. And I think those two things and the combination of the core value of just, trying to maximize the value of each case for our client and litigating cases. We're volume firm, but we also, our lane is to do volume, but also really heavily litigate cases to maximize value. So anyway, sorry, that was a little bit longer.
No, listen, that's the type of stuff we tune in for, right? Like, one of the reasons I started this podcast was to talk to interesting people doing interesting things. And so with law practices and the business of law, right? So it sounds like when you say litigation, are you also, your firm does trials in-house?
Yes.
Okay. So, and that to me seems to be one of the biggest needle movers. And we share a lot in common, where I think I've talked about it before on here, but I started out doing trial work as a PI lawyer. And for many, many years, I made a lot of money not trying cases, but just working them up and then settling. But we went back to trials because my guiding North Star was what's right for the clients. It's not money. That's not my driving force, right? That's not my North Star. So we have that in common. And the other thing we have in common is the brain injury stuff. Like, we developed this niche in our area, in our market, for brain injury cases because we understood the medicine. And I know you're a big proponent of, you got to understand the medicine. And the medicine of brain injuries is pretty complex, right? Because the brain itself is so complex in trying to understand the medicine, right? So give us your take a little bit on that, the medicine of brain injuries.
Yeah, sure. The things that we got into, obviously, is, the brain injury for when I first started with is, it's the invisible injury, right? So over time, then we've now got more tools that we got objective tools to be able to show that there is a brain injury. But the biggest thing that I learned after having the case that I had, basically we had a gal that had about $35,000 in orthopedic stuff, and she was having all these problems. And I was going like, what is this? I wasn't even sure what it was at that time. And I brought in the other attorney. And so we kind of learned about brain injury. So the thing that we did is start asking the questions at intake. And I think that's the biggest thing that a lot of people miss. I think there's probably somewhere between 15 and 20% of your new cases that come in have some sort of probably a concussion, maybe mild, but some of those develop into longer term problems. And I don't think we were asking the right question. We noticed a big difference just by starting to ask that question, and increased our inventory. And then, really took a deep dive into the science of it, went to the TBI Med Legal out in San Diego, which was a great resource to learn the medicine, got hooked up with a lot of the experts that were kind of cutting edge in that field, and, started getting into the DTI MRIs and
yes,
things of that nature, and having to defend that on Daubert motions and so on and so forth. And then also litigating them and taking depositions in those cases is where you really learn the medicine. Is, you get a report from a doctor and you read it, and maybe higher than you can understand. But once you start litigating it and have to either defend your doctor or take the defense doctor, that's when you really start kind of learning the nuances of the science of the brain injury. And, you got the neural pathways with the water, and, how that moves, and how you get the tears and different things that can happen in the brain injury. So really enjoyed that. When I first started my career, I did medical malpractice, and for some reason I've gravitated to some of the more challenging, I'd say, practice areas of practice with medical malpractice. I think I learned from the defense attorneys a lot when I did that, and that's kind of where I cut my teeth initially. And then, when I went out on my own, I just really didn't feel comfortable trying and litigating medical malpractice cases because they're higher risk and expensive. And so we kind of gravitated towards the commercial motor vehicle cases, not as risky, actually more expensive, but not as risky. But they're very challenging to do them right. Until I started going to the national conferences, I certainly didn't know what I was doing in a commercial motor vehicle case, and readily admit that to people. So learned a lot, and we continue to, one thing is we try to feel like, I'm still trying to learn today, even at, practicing for over 30 years and being in my 60s. I still enjoy learning. And one of our core values for my attorneys is that I send them to 2 out-of-state conferences a year, one for a trial skills type thing where they actually have to get up and do things, and then the other one for such as, the trucking ATAA or TBI Med Legal or something along those lines where, there's some other good ones out there, TLC and Keenan stuff that, you can do a little more nuanced things. But anyway, we try to make sure everybody gets I want to invest in my attorneys to have that litigation and have that drive to always be trying to get better and learn more.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, we share that too. I have a new trial attorney who just started in my office probably about 4 months ago. And probably his first conference he went like month 3 was run by, I want to say it was either New York State Trial Lawyers, something where it was headed up by Andrew Finkelstein and John Hustall out of Fort Lauderdale. I mean, you're talking about people doing it at the highest level. You're talking about 8 and 9 figure verdicts. He came back just blown away. So I don't think lawyers realize what a gift that is. Like, I don't know about you, but I didn't have that coming up. No one invested in me. I had to do everything by trial and error, literally. But
yeah, I agree with that. And to be fair to my employers back then, their national conferences weren't really a thing 30 years ago, probably more is just in-state. And then over, I'd say, probably somewhere between 10, 15 years ago, you start seeing the development of that. Now there's a lot of choices and resources out there to be able to learn and learn from the best in the business across the country. And we want to take advantage of that, not just for me to go to it and come back and pass it along. I want them to experience and get the excitement that you just described that your associate came back with, and how excited they were and wanted to continue to learn and become the best version of themselves. So that's been great. But yeah, me the same way. I kind of, like I said, I learned from the defense side more than I learned from anybody else by getting my tail kicked here and there. So.
Right. Listen, if you're trying cases, you're going to get hit. It happens. You try to not make it happen too much. But look, anything can happen. We know that when there's a trial, right? But I think, it's interesting because we have a lot in common. I didn't realize we'd have so much in common. When I first started learning about brain injuries, TBI Med Legal was actually an online resource. And I was using that. And I learned all about the medicine, like you were saying. And we've had a bunch of them in our office. And you do learn a tremendous amount of the medicine just doing the cases. But that's been a tremendous resource. On the brain injury side, are there any other resources? Because I know that TBI Med Legal shifted from online to the conference once a year. It's unfortunately across the country for me. I'm literally on the other coast. Are there other TBI resources that you would advise people that are interested in jumping into TBI litigation that you found helpful?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. I think the Connectionology is out there now, as well as another one. TBI Med Legal has a thing that that I purchased. It's a resource. You can go back to all the discussions by all the speakers. And so if you pay X amount a year, then you have that resource that you can go to, which is great. So if you have a case, you want to pick a particular discussion that was on at one of those conferences, that you can look it up and listen to it. So I think that's a fantastic resource. Not only you may not be able to make it out to the conference because of the distance or the timing, or you got something else going on, but you certainly, if you have that online resource, you can look it up and listen to the same thing as if you've been there. So I think that's a great tool. And then, from there, I think the second best resource, or, once you have those cases and you get them into litigation, and my thing is that, go take depositions, let them take your experts, you go take their experts. That's where you really get a deep understanding and knowledge of the brain injury medicine that's behind that, and then also how you need to prosecute it and maybe even defend Daubert motions regarding the same. And one of the big ones is on the the DTI-MRI, that they try to challenge those a lot, and to make sure that you partner in with the right place for a DTI-MRI that has got the control group and all that kind of thing, that they can survive a Daubert motion. So anyway, there's a lot of resources out there in those areas I talked about. But then also, once you have a case, I would recommend pushing that litigation. You may get it settled and not go to trial, but if you're taking depositions, that's where you really, really learn it, in my opinion.
Yeah, you kind of have to, right? Like, you got these experts sitting across from you, and especially if it's an opposing party, the last thing you want is to let the guy just slide or the woman just slide. So you try to really get a ton of in-depth, open-ended conversations going. So yeah, I love the complexity of the TBI stuff. The medicine, every injury is so different, right? We had a axonal injury, axonal shearing injury. And man, the interventional radiologist that read, the DTI and all the different reports that we had spent like an hour on the phone, didn't even charge me. But man, this guy gave me an education. He just was so happy to really talk about the medicine in a way I would understand it. It was crazy. And I learned more in that 1 hour than I think of all the conferences I attended. It was kind of crazy, like you said. So you've experienced pretty significant growth in a short amount of time. You went from 3 lawyers to 12 lawyers, right? You said 12 in...
Yeah, 12. I think, I think Riley's been with us 4 years. Right before Riley, there was just 2 of us. So we went from 2 to 12 in, I guess, 4 years. So
that's insane growth. I mean, that's 600% growth. And again, now this shifts to the business side for a second. Are you still trying cases and lawyering?
I would say all the way up until last year. I had a big case that did settle. I still involved in some of the bigger cases. So I guess that still remains to be seen. But as we've grown, I've had to pull back from my caseload, and I stay actively involved in a lot of the larger cases, at least on a consulting side. Not so much doing all the depositions, things of that nature, but okay, let's try to chart a path on, where we need to go. So anyway, and just getting to the business side a little bit of it, not, just from my experience, for people out there that are starting to practice, I started getting involved in some growth conferences, PILMA, and some other masterminds that we got involved in. And so started getting the business of law probably, I guess, right at 5 years ago. I think I was involved in it before Riley started. And, one of the things I found through that process is that, I was hiring too slowly. I was afraid I couldn't afford them.
Right.
And what it taught me is to be able to be confident. And here's what my inventory is, and here's how much your average case value is, and here's how quickly you turn them. And so then you really can start putting numbers to it on, well, how many assistants do I need to handle those? How many attorneys do I need to handle those? And I would say I've been playing catch up for the last 5 years of trying to catch up of where we were. We were so underwater on hiring, I think, at that point. And then we were handcuffed by size, and then we built a building, and then we outgrown it now and actually going into another space as well. But now I think I've gotten a lot better at understanding what's the new cases coming in, what's already in our inventory,
right.
How many people do I need to be able to process those, to give good customer service, because that's one thing that we really are high on, and to be able to turn the cases and get maximum value out of them. So we're gotten a lot better at that. So part of that hiring, the growth over 4 years, is some of it's makeup from what it should have been maybe a couple of 2 or 3 years prior to that of already starting that process. So I think we're close to kind of at least getting even to where we should be. And we're continuing to now be more intentional about growth. I would say before I started the business of law conferences and education on my end, I didn't really have an intentional plan of growing and getting bigger and things of that nature. And so it was forced on me. So I embraced it, started going to conferences, learning about it. Now we have an intentional plan on, what's our marketing, what's our growth looking like, what do we need for building space, what do we need for attorneys and staff to be able to handle that, and try to forecast that out in the future and try to get the right people in the right seats to be able to handle clients' cases and maximize their value and take care of them well.
Are you guys doing EOS? Traction by Gino Wickman? You're using a lot of terminology. And again, I do a ton of masterminds as well.
EOS is what I'm not familiar with, I guess.
It's an operating system based on the book Traction. Given the size of your firm, you're probably doing some kind of operating system that gives you like an organizational structure. I mean, you can get to 50 people without something. So do you have a different system you're working?
Well, the Traction, I heard of that book for the first time a few months ago. And then I think we're in some master groups that I think are based off of that. So,
what masterminds are you in? You've referenced a couple of masterminds. Do you mind telling me, like, are they open masterminds? Are they closed masterminds? Are they like top secret?
Well, no, I don't think they're top secret. I didn't know if you wanted to talk about those or not specifically, but I don't.
Oh yeah, listen. I am a huge fan of masterminds. I belong to 2 right now. I may be adding a 3rd this year only because I'm looking for certain rooms at certain sizes. I want to be the smallest fish in the room at this point. So, I'm looking to see where the next iteration of that is. But what masterminds are you in?
The Legal Ascend is Rob Levine. So we were with him. And then also we had joined Fireproof recently, and we're getting ready to go to our first conference on that. They've got, both of them have great resources that have been very helpful to us. Before that, it was Daryl Isaacs and Rob together, and then they split up, and I ended up with both of them. So I had 2, but now I got out of one, and then I'm joined Fireproof. So looking forward to that. They seem to be very data driven, and that's where we're trying to get to. One of the other things is, our case management system, we just never got all in on it and didn't put my foot down and make it happen because it was a big lift. And so we finally did that, and hopefully by the end of this month is what we're looking at. Maybe we've got all in that where we can be more data driven than we have been in the past.
What system are you on? What case management?
Well, we were on GrowPath and just didn't work for us at the time. And so we changed to CasePeer. So we're trying to get all the data on it and, hoping that'll improve our ability to be data driven and make decisions based off that data and shorten the time on desk, I think is one of the key factors that we're going to be focusing on this year. And I think that instead of us having to do that manually, we'll be able to, pull reports and kind of understand that and get with our, we have team lead system. The thing that we've changed recently, that we had a kind of a group process where we had a team lead that was over 3 or 4 people, and they handled a group of cases together. And we changed that not too long ago. And the reason we had that is because we were growing so fast. We had a lot of people they're inexperienced. So we felt that they needed to be teamed up with more experienced people to kind of help train them and move that along, which I think that was right for a short period of time. But what we found is that there, unfortunately, is some people that can hide in that group. And then, so we changed that and assigned cases to everybody. And so they only have their own caseloads. And it's been eye-opening. We have some superstars that are awesome and, better than we thought. And then we have some people that are doing really good that we knew that. And then we have some people that are struggling. And so then that gives us feedback that, okay, the people that are struggling, we need to work with them and see if we can get them up to a standard that we would expect. And if not, then counseling, or maybe we need to make a move and change to bring in another person and see if we can get somebody that's that A or B player that everybody's looking for.
Yeah. So you joined Fireproof. Fireproof was started by Mike Morse and John Knockhazel. Very familiar with it. And it's based on EOS. It's basically EOS for law firms. Gino Wickman is their EOS implementer, right? So they've got kind of a unique version of EOS for law firms, which I actually I toy around with it a lot. I was talking to a friend of mine this morning by text message about it because it's unique to personal injury firms. You will never meet a bigger genius, in my opinion, than John Knockhazel, who is the nicest guy you'll ever meet. He's very generous with information and sharing, but I've been dancing around with the Fireproof masterminds for a while, but I've just done so much coaching that this year I wanted to take a pause for the first quarter, maybe the second quarter, and just get my legs under me again and just get, you go up, plateau, go up again. I just wanted to get some stability. We've got a lot of change going on because like you, we just broke everything again. We realized that our last case management system was no longer sufficient for what we needed. We implemented a different one, but then we had to get all new hardware. It's all the same iterations, right? You're just figuring it out. You're going, you're growing at the same time. I like to call it, you're building the plane while you're flying the plane. And stuff is breaking all around you anyway. You got to be comfortable with a little bit of distress.
Pieces flying off and just got to hang in there. So
you got to hang in there. You keep showing up and everything has a way of working out. But I didn't realize we had as much in common as we did. So you have 3 functioning offices right now in Oklahoma?
Yes, we're located in kind of South Oklahoma City, kind of near Norman, which is where, the University of Oklahoma is. And then we have one in North Oklahoma City, is actually a suburb of Edmond. So we're kind of north and south. And then we also are located in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which we went there probably almost a year and a half ago now. And so we're still working to get our footprint up there and just looking to expand our presence in that area.
Excellent. Listen, that's astronomical growth, right? You 6x the firm in 4 years. You got to be doing something right on the marketing side. Like, what is your biggest marketing tip for anybody that's listening to this? Because whether you did or didn't have an organized plan at the outset, a lot of people would kill to be where you are that are listening to this. What is the marketing thing that's working for you? Because you and I are on the same page about hedge funds and the 800-pound gorillas and the advertising firms. So there's a lot to unpack there. And I always like to give actionable tips that are kind of distilled down. Like marketing-wise, what are you doing that you were able to 6x the firm other than focus on client experience and results, which we all know instinctively you have to do, but doing it's a different thing.
Yeah. So I would say, besides just the client experience and getting referrals from past clients and repeat clients, the other thing is I did the phone book way back when, and then I switched over to, digital. I never have done the TV, radio, and billboards up until a few months ago. We added billboards finally, and I'll get into that in just a second. But I think the thing is when I went to a conference, met a marketing SEO group that I liked, hit it off with their VP, and I've been with them ever since. And I do give them a lot of credit for our growth on that. So they've done a very good job. But at the same time, I meet with them, I hold them accountable, I challenge them. And I think that's essential. I don't care how good a SEO company they are. If you don't learn as much as you can. I'm not a marketing guru or specialist, and some people really know a lot more about it than I am. But it's mainly explain it to me, and let's get the reporting and hold them accountable and press them to get better all the time. And that communication has worked for us and helped us grow. I think we were really strong in the digital market here in Oklahoma. And then, as things have changed over the last few years, there's a lot of competition and, there's, your dips and things of that nature. And so we kind of took a deep dive into it and kind of reevaluated everything. And then we've also rolled out a tagline, which Riley came up with. So I'll give him credit for it. It's in pain, call Cain. So
nice.
So anyway, that was something, and that's why we're adding billboards. We're also considering doing some TV now as well, and a really branding play. And I think at this point, we're wanting to brand that tagline and use that to get people to where they just know our name out there. So that's where we're going now. I had never done that until just recently. And so we did a new website, and I think we're starting to see some traction from that. And, we've made sure that we have good relationships with providers, and we get them that, they send us their employees and their family members. And so we get some referrals from them as well as our past clients. So between all that, it's just continue to work. In my philosophy on marketing, digital or whatever kind it may be, if you don't take that one that you get from them and multiply that into something else, like a 2, 3, or 4-fold that you get other clients off of them, you'll go broke. And so you better, when you pay for that client, to get them in the door, take care of them, give them a great experience, get a good value for their case, and then hope that they turn into a referral machine for you. Because without that, I don't care how good the marketing is. I think without doing that, you'll go broke just spending money, just throwing at the advertising machine.
Right. And you can't outspend the big guys. Like, we can shift to the conversation because you had mentioned in the pre-show notes about the role of private equity, right? So the big guys just keep getting bigger. Now the private equity players are coming in and buying the big guys, and the big guys are getting bigger and bigger. And so case acquisition has gotten more expensive. So one of the things I like that you just said, because we use a lot of the same lingo, which is awesome because I would have never got to meet you but for the introduction from Riley, is I had the epiphany last year. It's not just PI lawyers used to say, got to get him in the door. That's the hard part. It's not just that anymore. Not only do you got to get them in the door, you got to keep them in the door. You got to keep them happy. And clients' expectations have been changed by Uber, Google, Amazon. So they want a 5-star experience through the entire process. So I had the same epiphany you did, which is we have to step up the client experience to the point where I read a book. I forget the author's name now, Unreasonable Hospitality. I don't know if you've read it.
I haven't.
It's by a restaurateur who was in Manhattan, very famous case study, but basically it's becoming obsessed with that client experience and how do you weave it into a law firm. And a lot of law firms are toying with it right now because we all had the epiphany of, oh my God, I'm chronically understaffed. You're not alone in that, right? Ryan McKean, I don't know if you know Ryan, he took a $100 million verdict out of Connecticut. It was like their first big trial verdict, and it was $100 million. He's made a statement that right now across the country, probably 80% of the law firms are chronically understaffed, right? And so you having that epiphany is part of the iteration. Well, all of a sudden we wake up and we're like, wait a minute, I got to look at my case values and my case volume. And if I add more people, the right people, and we move the files faster, things will just take care of themselves, right? This episode is supported by TonaLaw, a modern law firm built on integrity and innovation. Learn how they're changing the game at TonaLaw.com. Attorney referrals accepted from across the country. You'll see what it's like when you send us a case. You'll have some happy clients. So on the client experience side, what types of things, and I'm asking this selfishly because now we're in the process of weaving this into our systems and processes ourselves, what types of things are you doing to enhance client experience, day in and day out?
Well, before I get into that, what you said resonates with me, and I know Riley and probably everybody in my office can attest to this, that I always say we want to be the Chick-fil-A of the legal industry. So
there you go.
Pleasure, because I think number one, they figured out a way to get people through that line quickly and put out a good product, and they're very nice and personable, and they obviously train their people well. So anyway, I haven't read any of the books, but I think there's actually some books on Chick-fil-A, but I actually grew up and, I waited tables and kind of recently hired somebody from the service industry that had some management background, and he's just killing it for us. We're in a customer service business. It just happens to be legal services, but we're still in a customer service business, and you have to know how to handle that portion as well as do the legal portion well as in addition to that. But if you're not giving them a great experience, then you're going to lose clients, and you're not going to get people referring back to you. But, we're constantly changing that. We created an intake team because, we were losing people because I had everybody more seasoned assistants taking calls and giving them to the attorneys. We changed that probably coming up close to 2 years ago. Not quite yet, but I think that was a dramatic, we saw 20, 25, 30% increase in our signed cases. And then now we've changed to, we have a litigation and a pre-litigation division, and we've got a intake / pre-litigation manager over the attorneys. And he's making sure that, okay, we're getting the cases in, we're making sure we're getting them into treatment right away so we don't have a problem there. We're also making sure their car gets taken care of, because if you don't do that, then that's a big problem. Luckily, we have a vendor that helps us with that that's been phenomenal for us. And then, which helped that experience, we have hardly any complaints on our property damage, which used to be a major source of complaints for us, and a time suck of our staff. And so that's been phenomenal. Then we're assigning out, grading the cases and assigning them out and trying to get them to the right attorney. And then we're considering creating a medical management team. So in other words, somebody's coming in and making sure that clients are getting to the treatment, and or if they've gotten MRI or something of that nature, that, you know, they're getting referred to a specialist like they should be, as long as we've got enough money, as far as, you know, policy limits, things of that nature. So we're trying to constantly refine that. And then plus we added a settlement team, which has dramatically increased our ability to get the money in and out the door quicker. And then I'm trying to work backwards, and we're not there yet. So it's always, you know, a work in progress, but we're trying to work back from there as far as our KPIs being, you know, the time on desk, and trying to fix each one of those areas, moving back from that. Okay, how long has it been in settlement demands, settlement negotiations? How long have they been released? And we've been working on records. We're also adding a team of a medical retrieval team. So I think our next area that we're trying to develop. So because there's medical records that a lot of them we can get in easy, and then there's, you know, like hospitals and things of that nature that we have to get through the portal, probably like everybody else does, and you got to stay on top of them. And then it's very difficult for, you know, a staff member to kind of just keep going back to that and remembering to keep tickling their calendar to call. And so those are some of the things that we're looking to put in place. We don't have all of that in place yet.
Right. But there's a lot of moving pieces. I mean, as I'm hearing you talk about this, I have a lot of this stuff going on. My firm's a very similar size. And I go, this is why it gets overwhelming some days, right? Like, I'm not touching files right now because I don't want to, but there's so many moving pieces to personal injury that make it so challenging and exciting. And one of the changes that I've seen in the plaintiff's bar is how freely everybody is trying to help each other, right? Like, as you said, medical management team, I remembered a lawyer that was sharing from the stage at a mastermind about how he has a nurse in his office. Now, the interesting part of that for me is I've always felt uncomfortable with the medical management. If it, like, you got lawyers out there that every case is a policy tender if you do X, Y, Z. I'm like, stop. That is you're borderline practice in medicine, and that just feels wrong to me. Like, so I've always tried to figure out, where does that line lie? I love the idea of a nurse consultant or a nurse practitioner on staff, because guess what? That person can actually practice medicine, where they can say, you know, look, I'm not a doctor, but I am a nurse, and all your symptoms seem to be pointing to X. I can't take credit for that idea, but I can tell you that as I'm looking at a medical management team as part of the growth, that to me was really interesting. That to me was super interesting, right? Because, you know, you try to do a delicate dance, and I don't know, you strike me as a very ethical lawyer. You're not going to be practicing medicine, and not every case is you go get X, Y, Z. And, you know, so you got to kind of thread that needle as a personal injury lawyer, right?
No, I agree 100%. And it's just a matter of trying to make sure that we don't get involved in making medical decisions at all. We're just trying to make sure that the client understands that, you know, the one thing I kind of talk about is you can't treat it like you trip and fell in the backyard, because then you go, if you want to go to the doctor, you don't want to go to the doctor. The problem that you get into is you may have things that develop over time. You need to go and make sure and be aggressive with your treatment to make sure that you don't have any problem. You settle your case, and then, you know, 6 months later, you're needing a surgery or something. So
right.
It's just, you got to look at it, or at least educate the client on it, that you can't treat it like that, you know, you can come back and get treatment through health insurance 3 years later. You're just not going to be able to do that. But I agree. We just try to educate them and say, listen to the doctor, you should follow their instructions, that type of thing, and making sure that they're getting to the right specialist once that decision from the treating doctor has been made. Here's what you should consider. But I love the nurse idea, because that'd be a great person to manage that.
Right.
Give them even more insight than I can. So anyway, yeah, that's a great idea and something we need to consider.
Yeah, and again, that's why I brought it up, because it was the first thing that came to my mind. I can't take credit for it, but what I'm finding is among the plaintiffs' bars is that when people are of like mind, client first, results oriented, and trying the cases, people are super generous with the sharing. And what you're seeing now is the defense bar can't keep up, because they're not spending the money you're spending to send your lawyers to trial courses. I've spoken to defense lawyers that are like, we have to pay for our own CLEs. So I'm not getting on a plane. I'm going to pay for the $199 package, and that's the end of my experience. Whereas you're sending your lawyers across the country to do trial training and medical training. Guess what? In the courtroom, that matters, right? And so I love sharing stuff like this on this podcast, right? Maybe somebody walks away and they're about to set up medical management and they're like, oh my God, that's a great idea. I'm going to hire a nurse consultant, put him on staff. And I spoke to a friend of mine who's a med mal lawyer in Long Island, and he's same thing. He's got an RN on staff, right? She screens all the cases for him. He doesn't have to pay an expert. He's got a built-in expert. So there is all this sharing going on. And that's the beauty of the time that we're in, right? All this stuff that we're talking about right now, if somebody listens to this, none of this was available 25 years ago.
Oh yeah, not at all. And it just wasn't out there. So there's so much more sharing and willingness to share than there used to be, even 15 years ago, I would say. And it's really, really changed a lot. And it's great. I think it helps everybody and lifts the practice for everybody.
Yeah, I agree. So what's the focus over the next 12 months for you?
Well, we're trying to transition. Riley's sitting there, go play golf. So, so anyway, the thing that we're really trying to refine is our being a data-driven decision-making firm and transition from what, and I think we've been in this space and people have told me this is kind of the hardest space and it's been challenging going from the mom and pop organization, which we were. And I always say, okay, we got our work family and really treated my employees like they're my family. I probably see them more than I do my family, So,
right.
Two, we're going to become a data-driven corporate organization. And I'm trying to say, okay, we're going to be a corporate organization with a heart for our clients and for our staff. But we also want to be data-driven and making decisions for our clients based on the data, as well as employment decisions based on data and performance based on data for those going forward. So I think that's the next big step for us. Plus, I think when we were talking about what our goals were, I specifically brought up that, I really want to be able to have this place run without me being here 24/7, and where I can step away and trying to invest in my leadership team of the attorneys as well as the staff to where they are confident in managing their team without too much of my intervention. And we're growing to that point. So
I think, listen, here's what I can tell you for sure, because I've been on EOS for 4 years and it has not been easy by any measure. And you grow so fast that stuff breaks, it stabilizes, then it breaks again. And I can tell you that Fireproof is that, right? Like, you haven't gone to the first ones yet, the first masterminds yet.
Right. Coming up.
It's going to give you all of that. You're going to be in a room with a guy that I rarely use the word genius, but John Knockhazel is a genius. From his compensation model, which I wish I had a better understanding of, and I will have to take another look at that. He's changed the game for law firms and data. Him and a guy, you know who Bill Biggs is? You ever hear of Bill Biggs?
He runs the Zoom calls that we've been on so far.
So he's with Fireproof as well. The two of them are geniuses at operations, law firm operations. And I have really disrupted my firm in the last probably about 5 months now. I brought on an executive level COO operator because I was like, I want a John Knockhazel who works for me, right? Big price tag with that. It was a little scary, and then, somebody in charge of my personal injury division, because we have 2 verticals, who also is a high level operator. And they come in, they don't ask a lot of questions. They break everything. They're like, oh, you're having a big issue. You don't have data and reporting because your software is not sufficient. Oh, you don't have the right basic software for your case management to function, so we're switching over this. All in the tune of like 120 days. So it feels a little chaotic. Not for me, because I kind of thrive in chaos. I'm the guy that you got to actually insulate other people from so I don't create the chaos. But at least I'm not the one creating it now, so they can't blame me. But you are perfectly poised for this because you've got the resources, the time. Sounds like your staff is already really, really good for the most part. So when you walk into that room, you're going to have some significant advantages. You just have to execute on what they give you.
Yeah, that's awesome, and interesting. You brought up just bringing on a COO, and you said we're kind of in a similar space. I just brought one on as myself 3 or 4 months ago, and somebody from the restaurant space.
There you go. There you
And
go.
he's kind of been learning how the legal space operates. But, the operations is really, when you get down to it, it's still just operations and
Right.
reporting and acting on those reports. And now he's a fractional COO and actually somebody I've known since like 8th grade. So anyway,
Right.
we're good friends, and he's been a wonderful addition and helping, I think, move the needle a lot quicker than what we had in the past. I always, use the term that is trying to change things like turning the Titanic at this place when we just didn't have enough hands on deck, I think is the big problem. But I think he's put a bigger rudder on that Titanic, and we're turning a little bit quicker now, and we're being a little more mobile and adjusting. And I'm excited to see where that goes. We also, and one thing I would suggest to people that, once they start growing to a certain size, that bring in an HR person. I brought in an HR person just recently, and that was probably at least 2 years too late, maybe 3. So we should have done that a while back. And it's, I think, going to take so much off my plate, and the headaches that they can handle for us now is tremendous. So I think those two are just great time savers for the owner to be able to do things that really probably matter and moving the needle quicker.
Yeah, look, I'm super excited to see where you go because you're already at a really high level. So now you go into Fireproof. I mean, I know their team. I met Mike Morris. I met John Knockhazel. I went to their conference. And when you implement that stuff, you're going to see a hockey stick. You'll still be breaking stuff because that's what we do. But at the end of the day, you can't go wrong. That is traction. When I was asking you about EOS, it's basically EOS for law firms. They say, look, we're a little different, but it's foundationally the same thing. It's data, people, technology focused. So it's all the things you're looking for. It's all the things you're looking for. And the accountability that it creates is exactly what you're talking about, right? You start to look at somebody and you go, okay, what's the one number this person's responsible for that moves the needle for that person and for the firm and for the department and for the clients, right? So you're actually in really good shape. And I think that's why Riley wanted us to talk separately. Well, he said, do you want to talk separately together? I said, well, kind of separately because Monty seems to have some really cool stuff going on, separate and apart from the really cool stuff that I found about you online. So yeah, I'd like to talk separately because you both have an hour worth of really interesting stuff to go over. And I'm super excited. I'd love to hear after a year on Fireproof, just exactly where you've gone because you're already instinctively in a really good place.
Well, yeah, I appreciate that. We, look forward to becoming more data driven and using that to drive the law firm and create accountability and give a better customer experience with that data reporting that we'll be able to use.
Right.
And focus our efforts in areas where that tells us to focus efforts.
Right. And, one of the KPIs we put together, because we said client experience is so important. So our attorneys are, we're all data driven, right? So we say, okay, we need to see in your first year X amount in revenue generated. That's data point 1. I want to see your team satisfaction score or unwanted turnover, we call it. I want to make sure that's as low as possible or your team satisfaction score is as high as possible and your client satisfaction score. And we're constantly looking at those 3 KPIs across our attorneys because it's not enough to be a good attorney if the clients aren't happy or if the team is not happy. If the team is voting with their feet, you've got an issue, right? As a business owner, you've got a massive issue. That's never good. And I'm speaking from experience. Clearly, I could spend another hour talking to you about it. And I'm sure you've gone through iterations of this because how long have you been in practice?
30 years.
Yeah, so you've seen everything I've seen plus another 5 years, right? I've been practicing 30 years. I've had my own firm for 25. So same exact thing. So look, I want to be respectful of your time. I want to thank you for coming on. If you're not big online, how is it that people can get in touch with you if they want to reach out or email you or something, like if they want to refer a case to you specifically or say, hey, I got a case I want to talk to Monty about?
Yeah, Cain Law, or, you can go to our website, but my email is monty@cainlaw-okc.com, and it's Monty with a Y, Monty, and Cain is Cain, and then the OKC's for like Oklahoma City. So Monty
Gotcha.
at cainlaw-okc.com, or just pick up the phone. Our phone number is 405-759-7400.
You guys are also parachuting in on cases, you said, right?
Yes. Yep.
So like the trucking world is a fascinating space to me. I have a buddy of mine who's big in advertising, and he gets in trucking cases. And I'm like, if I was you with those cases, I'm calling in a trucking expert, right? Because I'm a big believer in, it's a niche world. Like, there are attorneys that are certified trucking experts, and it's a different world. There's different statutes, there's different rules to the game. So they may be paying you well if you're getting the case in, but are they paying you full value like a trucking attorney can get? And I'm really embracing this year and last year the idea of parachuting in experts on these massive cases, because from a business perspective and the client perspective, it's the right thing to do. You may end up on a business side far higher, bringing in a parachuting trial lawyer who's got a background in that area than trying to hold on to it yourself, because the carrier is not going to be worried about you if they've never heard your name on a trucking case before.
Yeah.
Versus like having an expert who's a certified, a BOTA expert or whatever, So listen, I want to thank you for coming on, man. This hour flew by. I wasn't sure what we were going to talk about, but Riley was right, man. You're doing some really cool stuff. And I'm happy that my audience will now get exposure to you, because if you're not online, they may hear this and go, you know what? I got to try to find this guy online from wherever he is. Maybe Riley gets you just on LinkedIn, right?
Yeah, I am on LinkedIn, so they can reach me on LinkedIn. And Thomas, I appreciate you and Riley getting this set up, and really enjoyed speaking with you. And hopefully we'll speak again in the near future, because
Absolutely. Listen, you may see me at one of those fireproof masterminds. You're kind of selling it for me, so I'm kind of tempted now. You got me kind of tempted, so.
All right. Sounds good. Look forward to seeing you in the future. Thanks again.
All right, my friend. Thanks for coming on. And it was a pleasure meeting you.
Pleasure meeting you as well. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Lead Counsel Podcast. Your host, Tom Tona. Go anywhere podcasts are distributed. Follow us. Leave us a 10-star review. Share some episodes with your friends. And thanks for listening. I appreciate it. Thank you. This episode is sponsored by TonaLaw. They're not just another law firm. They're defining what it means to fight for their clients. We get a lot of attorney referrals from across the country. We pay fee participation in all jurisdictions where it's permitted. We focus on integrity, innovation, and relentless advocacy. TonaLaw is proving that the business of law can scale without losing its heart. If you want to see how a modern firm is built for impact and happy client referrals, check out TonaLaw.com. Mention again the Lead Counsel Podcast, and I'm happy to get on the phone with you.